recover, so that the life we share our planet with can not only survive, but thrive. Making these goals a reality will take all of us working together. Reverse the Red is supporting governments, conservation experts, and communities around the world as they join forces to activate tried and tested tools and tie global efforts to local expertise. All in a coordinated effort to assess, plan, and act for wildlife. Together, we can save species from extinction. Together, we can secure our planet's future. Together, we can reverse the red.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Megan Joyce. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Coordinator for Reverse the Red, and we are so excited that all of you have been able to join us for this first of our Road to the World Conservation Congress series of webinars. This one will feature a number of different conversations around some of the plant and herbaria motions that you might find either in electronic voting or in discussion at the Congress itself. So by way of an introduction to Reverse the Red and why we kind of started this webinar series now in August, we have a number of different ways to engage with Reverse the Red, one at the sort of local level, one at the national level, and one at the global level. And so as we prepare for the World Conservation Congress, the global stage for species conservation, we really hope to elevate and amplify all of the species conservation work and all of those important campaigns and discussions around species recovery. And so that's where a lot of these motions come in, and we have a wonderful set of panelists to talk you through all of those motions. If you are with a national government or a regional government, or if you are more on the local side, we have a couple of different ways to engage as well. We have some civil society national networks that we are supporting. And so please get in touch with us if you'll be at the Congress and would like to meet with us in person about that. And then I will also paste in the chat a link to the Reverse the Red Species Pledge. This is an organizational pledge where you can commit to certain actions that will help to reverse declines for species. And you'll find all of the information about making that pledge and how you'll be able to connect with other organizations on that page as well. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Carly Cowell, who will be moderating this session. As we go through, please add your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom. And as we get started, please introduce yourselves in the chat as well. We love to hear where you're from. Carly.
Thanks, Megan, and welcome everyone to the first of the series on these talks on the IUCN motions. So before we get to our panelists today, and each will explain the motion that they are supporting, I'd like to walk you through the process for IUCN motions, because there's two stages that you need to be aware of. So the first stage happens before the Congress itself, the weeks leading up to the Congress, when all eligible members are going to receive access to electronic voting platform on the IUCN online portal. The motions are now available to read through, and voting will begin on the 27th of August next week and run until the 10th of September. These will be electronic voting, and if they are adopted electronically, that's it. The motion is confirmed, it's finalized. There's no coming back for further discussions during the Congress. This is planned to help clear the agenda. We know in the Congresses, the agendas often run over time, and this is planned to ensure that there's time in session to focus on more complex issues. So the second stage takes place during the Congress in the Members' Assembly. And here the focus is on the motions that are a bit more complicated, some that may have amendments or where some of the members have raised concerns. And these will be presented and debated in the plenary, in the room. You'll hear proposers explain their cases. Members will have a chance to speak either for or against a motion, to clarify things, and it's open time for discussion. Once that finishes, then there's time to vote. And the in-session voting, each delegation will receive a secure remote device, and which you can then click with one vote. And these are calculated immediately and then displayed in plenary in real time. And we can see which motions were adopted and which ones may need to be revisited again. So what we need to do now is read the motions, do the electronic voting, clear the agenda, clear the decks for those that really need those debates and the clarifications. There has to be for both electronic and the in-session voting. We need a majority of both categories. So that's a majority for states and government agencies, and a majority for NGOs, Indigenous peoples organizations, and other members. And when both groups have a majority agreed, then a motion is officially adopted. So, in short, please pay attention to the speakers I'm about to introduce. Please read through the motions that are available now online. Vote electronically, have discussions, have email discussions, and really get engaged with these. These motions are there to save species, because it is, as Megan has said, the species conference that we're going to save species for conservation. So that being said, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Olivier Hassinger. He's the grant manager at Foundation Franklinier and an advisory committee member of the IUCN SSC Global Tree Specialist Group. Olivier will be presenting on motion 1, improving tree planting practices. So Olivier, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Carly. Great. Welcome everyone to that webinar. So a few words about the background, about this motion. So it's a very important motion for Fondation Franklinier because we're focusing on threatened tree conservation worldwide and supporting the conservation of threatened trees. So we are fully behind this motion. But so this motion stems from a number of key facts and observation. It has been developed jointly by 11 members of IUCN with the support of the experts of the IUCN SSC Plant Conservation Committee and some members of the Global Tree Specialist Groups as well. So first of all, it's important to note, and we know now since 2024 that actually more than 1/3 of the world tree species are threatened. And we are also really deeply concerned about the continuous loss of native forest. And also a second fact is that tree planting has gained really great momentum during the recent years. And I think that we can say that there is currently really a big buzz worldwide about tree planting, because tree planting is actually often portrayed as an easy fix to climate change and an easy way for the businesses and for the countries as well to compensate their carbon emission. However, there are lots of evidence in the scientific literature that shows that planting the wrong tree in the wrong place or clearing native forest, natural forest for tree monoculture can actually lead to net carbon emission and can be very detrimental for biodiversity and basically the people. So there is now a huge opportunity with the UN Decade on Restoration to do the things right, because we know and we are convinced that basically restoring, conserving natural forest, natural ecosystem, particularly actually the remaining intact forest, is absolutely essential to halt the current biodiversity crisis. So that's really about the background of this motion, and now more specifically about what this motion is calling for in terms of action. So we specifically asking that motion that IUCN works with its partner to one, prioritize conservation and protection of remaining natural forests for the long term. Then, in addition to social safeguard, adhere to principles that safeguard biodiversity in tree planting projects, typically like the ones that have been developed in the Global Biodiversity Standard. Never plant invasive species nor promote their use, and basically monitor and control the spread of invasive alien trees from existing plantation. Restore degraded natural forests, avoiding tree planting in non-forested habitats, such as grasslands, and prioritizing area that basically improve conservation value, like doing restoration in key biodiversity area in KBAs. It's also important actually that IUCN work with international bodies to really make a distinction between a forest and a plantation, because currently, according to the definition from the FAO, as long as you have a certain tree cover, it's considered as a forest. And we know really well that it does not at all the same value from a biodiversity conservation perspective. And also, we hope that IUCN and the IUCN members, so that the Commission and the member of the Union, promote natural regeneration of forests in suitable habitat, and basically plant trees only when it's really required. And when they plant trees, they need to select a diverse mix of suitable site-specific native trees, understory species, and preferably with the associated mycorrhizal fungi that will help the restoration efforts to be successful. It's key also to use planting material that are site appropriate, preferably locally sourced, genetically diverse, resilient to climate change, fires, pests, and diseases. And it's key also, and that's also something that the motion is calling for, to support the development of supply chain of appropriate material for planting. And that includes seed banks, field gene banks, nurseries, seed orchards. So all those elements are key elements to ensure that the threatened tree species can be conserved in the long term, and that the native forests are also conserved in the long term, and that the restoration that is implemented through many different projects around the world are done following really the best practices. And I could go on a bit, but I think I'm getting to my 5 minutes. So there are still a few important action that the motion is calling for, but I think I'm going to stop here because I've said already many things.
Great, thank you, Olivier. I see there is one question for you in the Q&A. From Christopher Dunn. Christopher says, I've been actively supporting Motion 1. During earlier online discussion, there was an attempt to change it to concentrate more on soil biodiversity. Has this attempt been successfully mitigated, or do you expect it to come up again at all?
Oh, excellent question. So yeah, that was something that we were worried as well when there were the online discussion about the motion. We saw that the facilitator tried to really change the essence of that motion. Thanks God, all the IUCN member were supporting and sponsoring that motion. They requested to get back to the original version of the motion. I think the current version still has stick to the original spirit of that motion. But that's a really good question, because we would like to ask that all the IUCN members who will be present during the member assembly will pay attention that during the deliberation, during the member assembly, the goal of the motion is not diluted. The nature, the essence of that motion is not diluted during that time, because it's possible that according to the comment that will be made during the member assembly, the motion can be slightly modified from its original version.
Thank you, Olivier. And I'd just like to point out that this particular motion is already going to the members' assembly. It's been noted that it is to be voted in session. So there's no electronic voting on this one. But Olivier, do you have one final takeaway action that you'd like to share with the webinar attendees as they prepare to vote on the motions and particularly in session?
Yeah, right. So yeah, maybe two things I want to say to the member of IUCN who will be present during the member assembly. So use your common sense, please, during the deliberation, because that's important to and give all your support to that motion. We strongly believe that it's a very important one for the future of the forest and the threatened tree species worldwide. And I just want to say also that IUCN influencing power is actually really urgently needed to promote a transformative change in tree planting practices and reforestation program worldwide. And we really count on you to support this motion and make that move, make your restoration programs move in the right direction.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Olivier, and good luck with motion number 1. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to move to introduce our next speaker is Ellie Pepper, Director of Forest Policy at the Natural Resource Defense Council. Ellie will be presenting on motion 45, reducing the impacts of forest biomass energy on climate and diversity. Ellie, over to you.
Thank you, Carly. As Carly said, my name is Ellie Pepper. I am the Director of Forest Policy with the Natural Resources Defense Council, and I'm here to talk about Motion 45. NRDC has worked on forest bioenergy for over a decade, primarily in the U.S. Southeast, which is the primary sourcing ground for wood pellets that go to Europe. A little bit of background about forest bioenergy. So for those who don't know much about it, trees are cut down in primarily in Canada and the US Southeast, as I said. The bioenergy industry often says they use waste and residues of logging operations, so basically leftovers. But that's not actually what we found. We found through myriad investigations, both our organization's investigations and journalists' investigations, and other nonprofits, that there's often clear cutting of forests, including old growth forests in Canada, the boreal. In the US Southeast, it's a lot of hardwood bottomland forests. So we're talking about trees here, whole trees. Those trees are then turned into pellets that are shipped to other countries that have deemed bioenergy a clean energy or carbon neutral energy. The theory goes that this is carbon neutral because trees grow back. But I think most of us know that trees don't grow back within the timeframes relevant for climate change. So this is really not a carbon neutral energy source. And in fact, it's damaging to really every part of our environment, and a parade of terribles, really. So when the trees are logged, obviously that takes away a critical carbon sequestration mechanism for our planet and destroys biodiversity. I think many of us here care a lot about wildlife and specifically birds. There are many areas being logged for forest biomass in the US and Canada, and to a lesser extent, but still quite a lot in Estonia and Latvia and other countries where this logging is taking place in critical habitat for imperiled bird species. And birds are very sensitive to noises. For example, loud noises can cause many bird species to abandon their nests. So it really has huge biodiversity impacts. When the pellets are made, this is another huge problem. They're made in pellet mills, which are highly emissive. These pellet mills are often in environmental justice communities. So we're talking about communities that are very impoverished and have a very high percentage of Black people. We work with partners in these communities all the time, fighting these huge pellet mills in their communities. There are literally examples of people not being able to ever leave their homes because the particulate matter, the dust in the air, is so pervasive that they can't breathe. There's very high rates of asthma and other sicknesses in these areas due to the pellet plants. And many of the pellet mills violate their air pollution permits on a regular basis. Recently, Mississippi in the US, which a state not at all known for enforcing environmental regulations, fined a pellet mill for its air pollution violations, which really shows if Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality is fining you, you know it's bad. So then they're shipped to Europe, and again, so to be burned in large power plants. The biggest of these in the world is Drax in the UK. Again, this is a very highly emissive process. Drax is also known as the UK's #1 polluter. But it's getting subsidized because it's renewable. So this is it's really often, when I talk to journalists about this, they actually say their supervisors won't let them write about this because it must be fake. And I agree that it sounds fake, but it's not. So again, just to outline some of the biodiversity impacts, there's logging in the North American Coastal Plain Biodiversity Hotspot, Natura 2000 areas in Europe. All of these impacts led more than 650 scientists before the Convention on Biological Diversity several years ago to write a letter to the head of the COP asking them to end industrial bioenergy. What else can I tell you? Well, I guess getting to the motion specifically, a lot of people don't realize that this has effects on plant species. So some of the trees being sourced for biomass energy are imperiled. And I think most of that is because the people cutting down the trees, they don't know what species they're logging, and they're logging in highly sensitive areas, but they're just going to cut down everything. And that's because, well, one, the demand is so high. They need to cut down everything to make this business efficient. And two, they don't know, they can't really tell, like I said. And in the IUCN red list, bioenergy at present is not listed as a threat. So I think that's one of the reasons that we wanted to to put this motion on the table. So this will ensure that bioenergy, industrial scale bioenergy from forests is really more incorporated into IUCN's thinking about species threats. And it also urges parties to the KMGBF to look at these subsidies to bioenergy as part of Article 18, an environmentally harmful subsidy. So in conclusion, this will be voted on electronically. And we encourage you all to vote yes on it to support the motion. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to email me. I'll take questions now too, obviously. But if you have any more, it's epepper@nrdc.org, and I would love to answer any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. I think I've learned more about wood pellet production and its environmental impacts in those few minutes than I had previously known. Quite scary, as you say. And it just keeps going on along the production line. I see we do have a question in the Q&A. So does the text of Motion 45 include supporting documentation of the location and the impacts of pellet mills?
So we actually know a lot about where the pellet mills are already. So it does not. As bioenergy expands, I think, and production expands to parts of the world that are maybe less known, that have less reporting mechanisms, I think that is a good idea. But right now, Southern Environmental Law Center has a map of all the pellet mills in the US. And I believe we know where they all exist in Canada as well.
Thanks. Ellie, and just could you perhaps clarify what this motion applies to and what it doesn't apply to?
Yeah, so there was some discussion about that in the online discussion. I think it's very important to emphasize that this only applies to forest bioenergy, so bioenergy from actual forests. We're also talking about industrial scale energy production, so huge, massive pellet mills that take trains and trainloads of pellets a day to create electricity. Also, the motion recognizes the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities, and acknowledges their dependence on forest products. It also, through the online discussion, it now acknowledges that some limited forms of bioenergy, such as dendroenergy from well-designed plantations on degraded lands, may help restore areas, which is not something I know too much about, but I think it's a positive change in terms of creating consensus.
Great. Thanks, Ellie. I think we'll need to move on to our next speaker, who's also with the National Resource Defense Council, one of your colleagues. So thank you, Ellie. And I'd now like to move to introduce Jennifer Skeen, who is the Global Northern Forest Policy Director. And Jennifer will present on Motion 11, delivering equitable accounting and means of implementation for international forest protection goals. Jennifer, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much to Reverse the Red for having me here. And thanks to Ellie for teeing up my presentation so well. Our motion is really aimed at tackling the systemic drivers and enablers of the biomass myth and the unsustainable logging that feeds it. If I could go to the first slide, please. So this motion, just to tee up, is going to the Congress, and it is co-sponsored by NRDC along with 8 other organizations. And what this motion will do is align the IUCN with calls globally to advance equitable accountability on forests. You can see on the slide here kind of a general summary of the motion's provisions, but generally it's about engaging IUCN in addressing systemic inequities and disparities in global forest policy, which I'll get into a moment, and really ensuring that as governments move towards delivering on 2030 forest targets to halt and reverse deforestation and forest degradation, that they are doing so in a way that is equally ambitious and aligned behind shared and common standards and definitions, expectations for monitoring, and practices for reporting. Next slide, please. So this motion really arises from the fact that for decades, we've had a very unequal system where scrutiny for delivering forest protection falls almost exclusively on deforestation in the tropics. Meanwhile, as Ellie just highlighted, we're seeing devastating impacts in northern forests, which are temperate and boreal forests, that likewise also have catastrophic implications for the climate, biodiversity, and human rights. Basically, the global north isn't held to the same standards it asks of the global south. It benefits from definitional workarounds and vague terms like sustainable forest management that effectively paper over the very high rates of degradation in northern forests. So, for example, Canada clear cuts more than 1 million acres of forest each year. Most of that sort of gets erased in global discourse because that is not actually considered deforestation. They instead say that is all sustainable forest management. The problem only becomes even more acute with the actions of President Trump in the US to ramp up logging on federal lands and erode environmental protections. And of course, this is also fueling and supporting the myths that really fuel much of the dirty biomass industry. And counterintuitively, there's actually a lot less information coming out of the global north on what forest impacts are, because again, there's this assumption that there is very little in terms of industrial impacts to report. So for example, in the 2020 Forest Resource Assessment, the FAO called on or requested that countries report on rates of degradation. And as you can see from the stats on the slide, only 72% of the covered area that was reported was from the tropics, 15% from temperate forests, 4% from the boreal. And there are many other stats that show a very similar picture. Next slide, please. This doesn't just affect the global north. It really weakens global standards and governance, creates very fractured, inconsistent economies, and of course, places a disproportionate burden on the global south. And it also diverts financial flows from actual solutions. So instead, having subsidies go to industries like biomass rather than where they're actually both needed and would help to promote truly sustainable solutions. Next slide, please. So since 2023, we've been working to advance policies and a vision for facilitating equitable accountability in forest governance. This really started in August 2023 when the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment actually issued a call for what was then called the Glasgow Declaration Accountability Framework to drive equitable ambition on forests. That was before some of the more recent forest commitments and really framed around the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forests and Land Use. But from there, we've seen numerous calls from civil society. Nigeria has continued to be a leading voice on this. And now we have this motion going to the Congress. Next slide, please. So there's a real moment for this as well. And the World Conservation Congress and this motion are coming at a really critical time on this particular issue. We're seeing lagging ambition continuing as we near the 2030 deadline for action. Ambition is insufficient everywhere. And of course, the information around actually showcasing and coordinating around getting to that 2030 target is not adequate. As I mentioned, there's a regressive government in the US now really showing the dangers of ignoring the global north. There's a real understanding, I think, more so than ever before, on the need to really harmonize and synergize governance mechanisms, including around forests. And then, of course, Brazil is moving forward with the Tropical Forest Forever facility. And as we look to more solutions around finance for tropical countries, we need to make sure that we are elevating ambition everywhere. Next slide, please. Or that might be the last slide. So yeah, in sum, I know I'm out of time. Very much encourage and urge you all to support Motion 11 as it goes to the Congress. We anticipate it's going to face some fierce opposition from governments that are very happy with the current inequitable status quo. So could really use your support. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, a stark reminder that we need equitable accountability globally. As you say, global north, global south, we should all be answering the same questions. I have a question for you on, should your motion be successful and adopted? And, what immediate effect would you like to see this have globally?
Well, for one, that's a really great question. I think this would really prompt unprecedented awareness and attention on this issue. I mean, it's something that is not a secret. It's been kind of at the heart of a lot of the problems of international forest governance now for decades, but it's sort of fallen by the wayside because now it's just become sort of a systemic problem that is baked in and haven't really been any efforts to address it. I think also really one of the asks of the motion is that the Secretariat and the Executive Director pursue a study to really look at where those inequities are, where the gaps are. So starting to home in on where are the problems with coordinating aligned global cooperation on meeting those targets.
Thanks, Jennifer. I don't see any questions at the moment, but please do put questions in the Q&A for Jennifer, and we can answer them at the end of the webinar. So now I'd like to introduce our next speaker with a slight change of plant species from forests and trees to succulent plant species. So I'd like to introduce Domitilla Raimondo, who's the Threatened Plant Program Manager at the South African National Biodiversity Institute and is also the IUCN SSC Plant Conservation Committee co-chair. Tilla will be presenting motion 83, which is looking at urgent action to prevent illegal succulent plant trade. Tilla, you can start.
Thank you so much. And I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to tell you about this important motion. So it focuses on urgent action to prevent illegal succulent plant trade. And just to give you some background, we have incredible diversity of succulents across the world in all the arid hotspots from South America, the areas around Chile, Argentina, Mexico, Sonoran deserts of the US. And then a lot in Africa, Southern Africa, Madagascar. And what we've seen happening is a serious increase in interest in these plants, and that has been stimulated by social media platforms. So what's been happening is, online platforms such as eBay and various others have been able to promote and sell these plants and display their incredible diversity of form. And many of them are now sold for very high values. And then the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, even WhatsApp, allow very easy contact between local people on the ground who can access the plants and willing buyers. So I'll just take you through an example from the country I'm based in, South Africa. So we have over 2,500 succulent plants in our country, and many of them are restricted endemics. And since 2019, there's been an incredible increase in the legal harvesting of these species, such that we have constant confiscations coming into our botanic gardens. You just see some of the scale of the problem shown here. Overall, across the world, the work of the IUCN Succulent Plant Task Force has shown that there's approximately 878 species that have been targeted between 2022 and the end of 24. Those numbers keep increasing. And this is a problem that's hitting many different countries. So in particular, Africa and South America. It's also leading to the extinction of quite a few restricted endemic species. Some of those are shown in the slide. So There's also massive numbers of illegal confiscations ending up in botanic gardens, and that botanic gardens can't necessarily house the number of plants coming in. So a huge challenge, and a huge challenge to try to conserve and reintroduce. So because of this, we've decided to put the motion together. Oh, sorry, last slide is to say many of these are not yet on CITES. The trends change quickly. This is an example of a very restricted clivia, although some clivias are on CITES, this one isn't. So we've had lots of new species coming in this illegal trade. We can do something, we can raise awareness, and we can have incredible material to help online platforms recognize what's being traded, but there's a lot of work that has to happen. And so in Motion 83, we've requested the IUCN, its members, its commissions, etc., to analyze online trade and map supply chains, and then to co-develop protocols with e-commerce platforms and social media companies to actually get the protocols for recognizing these species. Many times plants aren't even seen as a problem for illegal wildlife trade, but really the challenge is huge. And then we're also calling for improving detection, prevention, and awareness of illegal online plant trade. Specifically, we also call on IUCN members, consumer countries, and consumer transit and source countries to really use this motion as a way to strengthen enforcement of CITES relating to the trade in succulent plant species in compliance with national laws, gaining information on the import and export of succulent plant species via increased collaboration with e-commerce and social media companies. We call on these countries also to provide technical support for efforts to reduce illegal plant trade. And then really importantly, we're calling on countries, both source countries, countries where the plants are being taken from, and the countries where they're going to, consumer countries, to look at really considering the Nagoya Protocol that calls for a fair benefit sharing, because at the moment there's no benefit sharing coming from this illegal trade, and to establish agreements under Nagoya Protocol to share the benefits arising from the trade of these plant genetic resources. And then lastly, to promote legislation and policies encouraging or requiring e-commerce and social media platforms to take responsibility for combating illegal wildlife trade. So that's our motion, and it's an online vote, so please be aware of that, and we would really, really appreciate votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tilla. Stark reminder that all plant species are under threat from something or another, wood pellets or illegal trade. And I see I have a question. It's more, what is your key message that you'd like to share with the webinar attendees about your motion as they prepare to vote on the motions? And this is an electronic voting motion.
Can you just say that again? Sorry, I missed it.
Sure. What is your key takeaway message that you'd like to share with the webinar attendees about your motion as they prepare to start voting?
Well, this is really a previously unrecognized issue, and it's become such a problem over the last few years, especially since the last Congress, that it's a critical time to vote this motion in, so that we can raise the awareness of the problem and ensure that both countries that are involved, as well as most importantly, these international online platforms, can take action. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Tilla. I don't see any more questions for Tilla, but please do add to the Q&A and we can ask her some more questions at the end. Thank you, Tilla. That was sobering and very informative. I'm going to introduce our next two speakers. Vikash Patia, Vikash, I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly, Conservation Director of the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation and co-chair of the IUCN SSC Mascarene Islands Plant Specialist Group, and Isan Dalu, President of the Board of Directors at the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation and member of the IUCN SSC Crop Wild Relative Specialist Group and Conservation Genetics Specialist Group. and they will be presenting motion 93 to recognize and strengthen the fundamental role of plant and fungal taxonomy and associated herbaria for the conservation of biodiversity, particularly in Global South countries. So, gentlemen, over to you.
Thank you very much for this presentation, Carly, and I think it's going to be a bit of a double act between myself and Ishan. Now, just to give you so I'm not attending the Congress myself, but Ishan will be there, so that's why he's going to be probably fighting a little bit for this motion on our behalf. A bit of a background on the motion. I mean, there were two motions that were originally presented. One was about greater recognition of fungal taxonomy and diversity, and following on from recognition of fungi as being a kingdom in itself. And also, we are not the main proposers of the motion, but we supported it very strongly. And the reason is because we feel that there hasn't been much importance given to fungi in studies and science, and yet they play a key role in terms of global biodiversity, but also in terms of all the services that they offer. And of course, they're under great threat. We have been more involved with herbaria on Mauritius, which is a global South country. We have a herbarium called the Mauritius Herbarium, which has been there since the 1960s in its current formal structure. But there are specimens in there that actually go back to 1759. So very old specimens. And attempts to create a herbarium on Mauritius go back to 1830. So we have one of the oldest herbarium in the southern global south, but with very strong links with herbaria in the global north. For example, Kew Botanical Gardens, Geneva Botanical Gardens, Paris Natural History Museum, etc. Missouri Botanical Gardens also, and various others. So there have been a number of problems facing the Mauritius Herbarium, and we don't think that this is peculiar to this botanical garden, because I've heard about the same things from other botanical gardens worldwide, but also from the global south, which is, with the advent of DNA techniques, there has for some time been a sort of a shift away from traditional herbaria, thinking, we can describe plants and we can understand plants just by looking at the DNA, which is only partly true, because very often you still need to have access to the ancient specimens that have been collected, X decades or centuries ago, and also come to the comparative analysis. You need the specimens. Now, the herbaria that we know of is dealt with some problems, which I think is typical of several herbaria around the world. They do take space, and so if there's a problem of space becoming constraining, we kind of oversee the fact that having all those plants in one space makes them actually quite vulnerable to floods, to fires, and all of that. There has been for some time a declining rate of collection of specimens to put in herbaria, and yet with the loss of genetic diversity happening around the world, it's probably precisely at this point in time that collections should be increased so that we can understand the genetic diversity that's present and that we're losing, and hopefully that we may be able to revive through some ingenious technologies that will come up. And taxonomy, as you know, in general, is not the sexiest of trades, unfortunately, even within the conservation community. And so there is in Mauritius just a handful of taxonomists, if not to say just one or two, and that probably slows down the progress. And despite Mauritius having a small number of plants, I mean, we have less than 700 flowering plants. We have a very high endemicity, going up to 45% to Mauritius. And if we include to the immediate region around Mauritius, is 65% endemism, which is very, very high. We are classed within one of the biodiversity hotspots, but very highly threatened plants. I mean, over 90% of our plants are threatened with extinction. And we are number 3 in terms of the state of the world's trees, in terms of threatened trees, tree diversity. So some of the other problems which the herbarium has had, but is not confined to just Mauritius, it would be, there's been some funding. It's difficult to find funding, especially in countries where the herbaria is part of a government structure. And bureaucracy, there's increasing levels of bureaucracy that kind of slows down the studies that could be done. And once I heard Domitilla talking about Nagoya Protocol, in some cases, Nagoya can actually slow down research because of the different hoops you need to jump through, which is all fair and good when it comes to controlling trade in plants. But when it comes to science, I've got the experience of Nagoya actually slowing down research in those areas. So, which is why we were very keen to be supporting this motion, and because we believe that this is quite important going forward, and for supporting the Sustainable Development Goals and Nagoya Protocol and Kunming Montreal Biodiversity Framework and so on. I'd like to pass on very quickly to Eshan, who probably has got more knowledge and experience with this convention.
Thank you, Vikash. Yeah, I don't have too much to add to what Vikash has said, so well done, Vikash. Except to say that I think the crux of this motion is about looking at the long-term investment of herbaria in the global south. As Vikash is saying, this is something which is really limiting research, limiting a lot of the conservation work, restoration work that needs to be done. So it's extremely important that we raise awareness among the states around the world to support the herbaria that they are in the country. And also, as Vikash said, there are a lot of threats to the gene banks, both in terms of bureaucracy, but also into physical security. So it is very important that we develop strong linkages between large herbaria across the world with those in the global south, so that we can safely duplicate a lot of these specimens as we deform a lot of the gene banks in the world, for example. So that is very important. So basically, not to lengthen too much on that, in terms of this motion, we are asking members to prioritize long-term investment in tropical global south herbaria and fungaria, promote conservation science, which is very much rooted in taxonomy, to foster that partnership between the global north and south. And so we call on states to emphasize the science of taxonomy in all its dimensions, and to underscore the critical role of herbaria in the world. And I would also add that herbaria has such an important role to play in meeting the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and maybe through the Global Strategy for Plant Conservation. A lot of the voluntary complementary action that has been laid out in the GSPC needs the identification of plants to be able to fulfill a lot of those actions. I'm not going to go in the details because of lack of time, but I think it's critical that we support the herbaria in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Eshan and Vikash. Yeah, fully supports the fact that we need herbaria globally, and to support the global south, as you've both highlighted, and in this motion particularly, the study of fungal species. So there's a question in the Q&A. I'm not sure which one of you gentlemen would like to answer, so I'll read the question and then you can decide. So do current online resources such as online herbaria World Flora Online, and BGCI's own efforts consider or include fungi, or do they only support flowering plant data at this stage?
I will try to answer by saying I'm not sure, because what I know is that there's a project to digitalize the species and to have a part of the specimens have already been digitalized and put on BRAMS, which is an online system. But I don't know whether it will, it does, to what extent it concerns fungi. Now, I don't work in the herbaria myself. I just need to point out, I do go there and check on plants now and again. But I don't know if Ishan has got the answer to this one.
No, to my knowledge, I think most herbaria in the world really focuses on flowering plants and maybe mosses, the lower angiosperms. But I'm not aware of much collection of fungi being in the major in the herbaria around the world. I'm not sure about that. Sorry.
And just to add that the Mauritius herbarium has got 25,000 flowering plants and ferns, and 4,000 specimens of bryophytes, lichens, algae, and fungi. So fungi is going to be a small proportion, very small proportion of what is on collection there.
Yeah.
Thank you both very much. Yeah, to my knowledge, a lot of herbaria, as you say, have small collections of fungi, but they are up and coming. They are being collected more and more and studied more and more, and we're trying to understand their role in our ecosystems, and we need the herbaria to support that, as we need them to continue supporting the flowering plants. So I do have one question for the pair of you. So you spoke both about the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the GSPC, and the Nagoya Protocol and how it can hamstring collections and management. But how would your motion relate to the UN Sustainable Development Goals and help achieve those goals?
Well, I think it links very well to SDG 14, if I'm not mistaken, which is life on land, unless I'm getting it confused with 15. It does support this, but much of the discussion is around restoring ecosystems and planting, which is where planting is becoming very popular. And funding is also going towards species restoration and habitat restoration, which is all good and fair. But I don't see that amount of interest being given to herbaria, or even for seed banking, for example, or other strategies to document, preserve genetic diversity. I mean, seed banking is something which is also quite important as well, to preserve.
Thank you. Thank you both. And we're on time. We've got about a minute left. And I would just like to thank all the speakers for sharing your knowledge, for discussing the motions that you are supporting. And I do encourage all of the webinar attendees to read the motions that are on the IUCN website now, to undertake the electronic voting. And as I said earlier, to clear the agenda for the in-session discussions for those that may need a little bit more debating and clarification. And the voting does start next week, 27th of August. It runs until the 10th of September. And then we will pause for a bit until we all convene in Abu Dhabi. But thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to Reverse the Red, Megan and Amy, and everyone for organizing this webinar. And I do wish you all a great morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.